Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick. Welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on Earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. Listen to their stories, hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest on this week's episode is Jennifer Eason. Her experience during these times has been as a frontline worker in New York to a deep researcher, content creator, and community builder. During our conversation, Jennifer shares what it was like to be a nurse when the pandemic was first announced and the reactions of her colleagues. We also talk about her content creation, which is focused on deep research and discovering the truth about the gatekeepers and the players in our present false reality. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel you're most her?
Probably when I am doing things that are more organic, because that's something that resonates with me. So if I'm out in nature and, engaging with people as well, not just nature, but just having those organic encounters with everyday people, I feel, the highest resonance and just highest consciousness and everything.
Perfect. Thank you. And, when you say engaging with people, this is kind of going to lead into this question, because I always want to find out how people have got to the stage that they are now and doing the work that they're doing now. And the way that I connected with you and found you was because of you were doing these great research broadcasts, if I want to call them that, but also you were including people like your community of watchers who were who were watching to engage in what you were doing. And a lot of the time I had to watch them back because it's just the time zone was like really wrong for me. But that's what I really liked. And I just wanted to know how you came into your awakening and then kind of moved into feeling that that's what you wanted to do, and not only just do it for yourself, but do it in a way that would create a community around what you were researching and what you were discovering about the world and people.
Well, for me, the awakening was a slow sort of rolling awakening ever since my childhood. And I always had a sensitivity for people, especially underdogs, as they say, and knowing that the world wasn't always kind and the systems that are in place can be, just overwhelming. I always had this sense of a caretaker, and I became a nurse. So I've been in the healthcare profession for over 30 years. And that helps with a person's awakening journey, because I've seen death and birth and everything in between, and really witnessed probably the most traumatic sides of humanity. So it just makes you very sensitive to life. So when you get to see that maybe life in this world system isn't all that you thought or you were conditioned and programmed to think it was, that is really jarring and somewhat shocking to the system, because you do want to believe in something. So you look for anchors, like, where can I find truth? And that's always been a quest, and sometimes I've not found truth. I found more, deception that's disguised as truth. So you just learn to use your discernment and not beat yourself up because you've maybe fallen for another layer of deception in this world, because it's a constant it's a constant thing, awakening to more truth and trusting yourself, your gut, whatever, your intuition, and helping others, because it's like we're all in this, it's like the cave, so helping others get out of that cave, that box, that cage even, you want to help others if you've gotten out and you've seen the light and you see that there's more to being caged. So that's more so probably my awakening journey in a simplified way. It's just seeing the traumas and experiencing them made me more sensitive to the human condition. And what can I do as a fellow human for the human family? Like, I want to be a healer. How can I help to heal people? And how can I help to be like a Sherpa in a sense, like, come on, we don't have to be caged. We can be free. Here, come this way. This is how I found the way out, so it's more so helping people to find their way out of this box, this cage.
And what a job that is.
Yes.
I mean, how have you found it with, or what resistance? I mean, everyone's got a story. We've all got stories of resistance that we face, and there's always shocks. There are people that we've considered to be the sharpest, the most radical, the ones that would, friends that I've spoken to have said, there's this person that, they were always at every protest. They were always on the front line. They were radical. They were up against the system. And yet here we are facing the biggest challenges of our lives, and they just don't see it. And, every day we're like, how is this possible? Or they're facing resistance. Even today, I had a friend who, I met her when I was traveling. She's out on the other side of the world, and she's just up in, she can't believe it. Like, relationships, long-term relationships, even love relationships have broken down because it's gotten to the point where people are at different, they just can't see what's going on, or they don't want to see. Have you found a way to cope with that? Because personally, I get to the point where I find it very traumatic to try and have conversations with people that are literally fighting against what you're trying to show them, fighting against truth. How have you found a way of working with that?
Well, it is hard
Yeah.
because that describes a lot of my family and friends that over this past year I have become estranged with due to this awakening. I mean, this is so different right now in terms of conflict between people. There's such a divide. I've never felt this kind of divide in my human experience. We've always had people be on, they have this opinion or you have this opinion, but it never mattered so much that it broke down a relationship. But now, this time in history, we're experiencing things that like literally tear people apart. They're tearing nations apart, families. I'm hearing it about people getting a divorce. That to me is so shocking. Like, this has ruined marriages. And marriages are hard enough, but to think that a political position or whatever could tear apart the foundation of a family, because basically that's what a marriage is a family. And even the family relationships, like I've had family members that I haven't talked to since, I guess 2020 came in like a storm, and they've, unfriended me on Facebook, or I've unfriended somebody on Facebook, or, these kind of things that I never really engaged in too much. It was never that serious. So the way I deal with it now is, I guess, I don't know. I don't understand what is strengthening me, but I have this resolve that I'm tapping into. And maybe it's because I've been prepared all along for this and never realized it. I haven't become depressed, which I'm wondering why isn't this affecting me? I've lost a friend who I've had since childhood, why is it not bothering me? I'm not missing the people. And I'm not trying to sound like a robotic person, heartless, but I don't miss them for some reason. And it's helped me to go about my daily, living. And before, I used to escape by traveling. That used to be my way of coping with things is, oh, I'm going on a trip. Like every 3 months, I'd go on a trip somewhere. But now I don't want to travel. So that's not an option for me right now. So right now I've spent time with the researching, like you mentioned. Doing those kind of deep dives have taken a lot of time and effort, and maybe that's helped me to cope, is to learn and unlearn and then share and have an exchange with people so that I can understand it better. And just focus on building community in a different way. That's what I want to do more so. I haven't really done it as much as I have envisioned, but that's what my heart really wants to build physical community with like-minded people that want to be free, because that's what this is all about. It's not about, a political position, a medical position at the end of the day. It's about being sovereign and free and not having tyranny dictate how we want to live. And it's hard to imagine some people don't want the same thing. Like that's been very difficult to understand, like in my family, for instance. I would think that my family would be more awakened to medical tyranny because the matriarch of our family literally was harmed by the medical establishment. And her life deteriorated because of the medical establishment, is very clear. And I would have thought like my family would be very cautious. So that's been shocking. Like, how can you fall for this stuff when you know what happened to our matriarch?
Right.
I
think with this, there's no trying to apply logic to it. Just logic isn't going to work. And even part of it is not even simply logic or simply emotion, which are usually the two drivers of people's thought process. It makes sense or it feels good, the basics. It's coming from a different place. I think it's coming from, when you're talking about sovereignty, it's when I try and think that I think I've got it. I think I've worked out what it is. Part of it is these are younger souls who haven't found that grounding in themselves. And as a result, they need external validation or external guidance. And we've never really realized how much they've been kind of like riding their lives on the coattails of government or celebrity or even their own peer group, until this is just like tearing the flesh off anyone, tearing the BS off everyone, basically. It's like, what are you really made of? What are you standing for? What are you prepared to, what are you prepared to stand up for? What are you living for? And the people that seem to be swept along with the deception, because it's like going in two directions. It's like the deception seems to be getting more and more ridiculous. It's like it's almost like the they're going on stage with the costume, but everything's falling off, so you can see it. It's like, come on now, look, can't you tell? And yet some people really can't. Either they can't, or they don't want to, or they don't want to admit, or whatever the reason is. And yet, as things continue, either politically, and then with this medical, you know, we can't call it a medicine, but this whole coercion that's going on, it's like put two and two together. It's, come on, it's not making sense. And then on top of that, it's not only that it's not making sense why they're pushing it so hard, it's that there's so much information. And I think, like yourself, I'm not feeling depressed about what's going on, even though it sometimes it's just like, how much longer is this going to go on? And I think it's, you know, personally, I think we've still got like a couple more years. I think it's like I think we're just kind of getting to the midpoint, and the midpoint where it's going to get really sticky now before we start to work out on the other side. And I you know, I want to be wrong, but I feel these next few months that we're going to go through are going to be the hardest ones, because it's, you know, people's decisions are going to be, they're going to suffer the consequences of their decisions, really. Whatever, and it's going to be hard for everyone. It's going to be hard to witness. It's going to be hard for people who are going to experience what they're going to experience based on it. And you know, I just want to be wrong, but the more, like yourself, the more research that I do, the more learning that I do, the picture actually makes more sense. It doesn't paint a very nice picture at the moment, because you're seeing exactly what we're sitting in the middle of and what the world really is like. And if it's things that I'm watching that are recent interviews, or even I've been listening to interviews of people and women in particular as well, some really strong, clear women who have been talking about this stuff like 5, 6, 10 years ago. So it's not a new thing. They saw it. They were like waving the flag all that time ago, and you can see what this is going towards. And that's why, like yourself, it's not that I'm depressed. I'd say frustration would be my, you know, frustration that it's taken so long, but it's going to take longer. I just, you know, feel that we're not there yet. Frustration that people can't see, frustration that people are fighting for the wrong thing, and in their fight against you, they are in a way your enemy, because inadvertently they actually are defending the very thing that's trying to take us all down. And that is, I think, one of the most difficult things to witness, because they don't realize what they're defending in their defense of the structure that they're holding up, that they're basically on the side of that. We're in a situation now where there's no middle ground. You can't sit on the fence. You can't pretend that nothing's happening, because we're going into the time where you won't be able to say that you can't see it, even if you choose not to act. One of the things I liked about you when you were doing your broadcasts and your sharings and your research was how in depth you went into all of that. And I think that it's a good lesson for people to learn how to research and to take out your emotion out of things that you want to be a certain way, and especially how we got deceived. And it's hard, I think, for people to admit they've been deceived, you know, like a life, especially if you follow people for life. You've either bought their albums, their films, you've invested into them, you love them, like we give these people this adoration, and then suddenly we find they're not who they are or we wanted them to be. And I think in particular as well, and I think you can speak on this, is the communities that really get played by that are Black communities and women, because they will place a figurehead where you'll just kind of fall in love with them because they're the first Black woman to do this. They're the, you know, and we just go along with that, as opposed to going, who is this woman? Where does she come from? What is the validation of her experience, and can she do the job? And who is she affiliated? Who is paying her? Can you just kind of talk a little bit more about that? I think in the UK, it's not as, I don't get the impression that it's as big a thing as it is in the US. In the UK, it kind of, the way that it works is a bit more subtle here. We don't really mention it so much, but you know, that because you did some really good deep dives on like Condoleezza Rice as well, which was somebody that I always, you know, I told you before, you know, she played the piano. I'm like, amazing. But then you're like, hang on a minute, you know,
Right. Who is she? Yeah. Yeah. I agree that it appears that in the US, it's more weaponized and it's much more mind control and appeal to authority in the sense of celebrity, I'll say. I know that celebrity is worldwide, but in the US it's really like it's so powerful. And we have iconic women, like you're saying, like especially the melanated iconic women, Black women, African Americans. So we have Oprah. I'll bring her up because Oprah was part of my awakening too, I'll have to say. I watched Oprah when she started in media and she became this iconic woman. She spoke for womanhood, just she was aspirational, not just Black women, but most of her following were non-Black women. And she was just so well spoken. And her success was like a meteoric success. So that made her so aspirational. I defended her because there were always detractors, like early on with Oprah, people that knew something wasn't right with her, or maybe they had, I don't know, envy about her success, but not everybody likes a person, that's natural. But some people were just really verbal in their attack against her. So I remember defending her and I just loved her. I scheduled my day around getting home before 4:30, I think it was, or 4 o'clock when her show came on. And it was like that happened daily. I look forward to her show during the weekdays, that is. And I hung on her every word. And then she expanded to have a more multimedia presence. So she had a magazine and I would treat that magazine. I got subscriptions and it would come to the home. And I was just so happy when I received it. And the thing about it, I had to lie to myself because her magazine was too aspirational, because by this time she had become so wealthy and she would suggest a Christmas list for a millionaire, like, who's buying this stuff, Oprah? You are so tone deaf. We can't like buy these things. I mean, it was just ridiculous, So I would kind of turn that off. Those were kind of those alarms. I would turn it off and still defend her. Oh, she's successful. That's what happens. I have to be happy and celebrate her. But she veered further and further away from her base. And it was hard to defend it after a while. It's not just this is a successful woman. This woman became so out of touch with the regular person's experience. And then her agenda became very, I don't know, like bashing of men, and I started to see like she was just into things that she was undoing a lot of foundational things. She was a part of sort of that. And I don't know what it was. One day I woke up to her because I literally ended a friendship over something I read in her magazine. Can you imagine? It was like she was right. It was an article in her magazine saying, you have to end certain friendships for your growth. And I hung, like I said, on every word. It was like a Bible thing. And I literally distanced myself from a friend based on me reading her magazine. So I realized, wow, Oprah has too much influence over me. And why is this? I had to like pull back and start to analyze it. It wasn't comfortable because I had to admit that I got caught up and it wasn't something I should have gotten caught up in. She became like a cult figure, and then I started realizing some more disturbing things about her. When she opened the school in South Africa, I started to see that something was wrong There were so many alarm bells going off with her. I did more research, and research, that started coming into just a clear vision in 2020. And I said, oh my goodness, she is so opposite of the person I thought she was. And I grieved it. I grieved that she is so deceptive, and she's not the person I thought. And that goes along with so many celebrities. We have, I think 2020 was the year of purging the idol worship.
Do you know what? To just kind of jump in there, I've kind of tweaked over the years how this podcast was. And when I started, it was Tools for the Awakening Woman. So I only spoke to women. And I had like a set of questions at the end. One of the questions that I'd always ask would be, what woman represents higher energetic resonance? And the top two women were Oprah, Michelle Obama.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So we'll just leave an open-ended air there as well, without necessarily going into certain things as well. And I was speaking to someone the other day, a man, about Michelle Obama, and when he kind of like he had to address his own deception on that. This is not the disclosure. The disclosure is not going to happen on that. I'm going to leave that for people to work it out themselves. But but that whole thing as well is like when I started to discover that as well, and I think because I was there with you, or just like the top list of women that I would look to, because my family loved them, but I always wanted more than where they were. So I always looked outside into the world to look at people that I could try to emulate in order to go their success and the way they carry themselves and what they talk about. And she was always there. And I, like you say, I know many Black women who will hold her up, but also many white women, probably more so, hang on to every word, and to be on Oprah, it was part of, if you wanted to be successful, particularly in the spirituality and wellness community, or you wanted to be a coach, or you wanted to write a book and you were doing a vision board, you always wanted to be on Oprah.
Oh yeah.
You always wanted to always wanted to meet her. That was a benchmark, because you knew if you got there, then like the eyeballs that would be on you would like shoot you into the stratosphere. It was a stepping stone to success. It was like a doorway into that other echelon of whatever, and then everything seemed to kind of work forward from there. So like yourself, to then find out that things were not as they were, and to the extent that they were not, one of the things that I did do is over that 2020 period, because on Instagram I was following a lot of celebrities, Oprah and all this kind of thing, but also a lot of singers and actors that I felt that they were doing a good job in terms of talent, but also the way that they were living their lives. And anyone who's blue checked, I just had to let go of them. And I noticed after a while how lighter I felt by not seeing them on my feed, because by seeing them on my feed, and I didn't realize this until it was gone, that you kind of watch their lives a little bit, and then you kind of like shut it off, and then you kind of compare
Exactly.
what you have, and you're pleased for them, but then it's like, yeah, but where's mine? Like I'm just as good. And then when you really understand the structure and why these people are put here, put in positions, and what their role is to lead and deceive you, it's a hard thing to admit that you've been taken, and it's hard to let go of, because every time another person will come in and you'd be like, oh, not them, I really like them, I really love them, you're like, no, not that. And one by one you do have to just be like, goodbye. And especially when you start to research symbolism, and you realize they've been telling you since day dot, and you understand how deception and evil works. Deception and evil isn't someone sitting there cackling and stroking a cat. Deception will sit by you, evil will sit by you and be your friend.
Yes.
and will lead you all the way off to the cliff and push you off at the end.
Exactly.
And that was a big one for me. So it took me a while to even come back and listen to music. You know, I kind of go way back, and just sometimes I'm like, let me just be ignorant about
I know, right? I know. I feel the same way. Like they say, ignorance is bliss, and it's heavy. It's a heavy crown, as they say. Wearing the crown of like knowledge and just being awake. It's hard.
How did your nursing play into this period of time? And where you were working at the beginning, did you say, when this whole pandemonium situation kicked off?
Yes.
How is it to be on the front line and see what was happening, or what did you see was happening?
When everything started, I remember it was the death of Kobe Bryant. Speaking of icons and celebrities, I am from Philadelphia, where Kobe's from, and his death was just jarring because every Black man, and not just Black, but just men, especially in my family, in my circle, they were grieving so badly when he died. So I felt the heaviness of the heartbreak of it. And that pretty much was the start of everything. Then I heard about this bat soup. It was just so ridiculous, right? Oh, they're eating bat soup over in wet markets, and now there's a flu, an illness that has transpired, and I'm thinking, what? And the narrative just started going so rapidly. And then all of a sudden, because I'm working in a hospital, and everything got strange. Okay. So first it was, okay, it's not a big deal. We don't know what we're dealing with. And the administration of the hospital, they lied to us, because I worked on a telemetry floor, regular medical surgical type of floor. And it was a catch-all, type of thing. So they were telling us things like, oh, we won't have to take care of these, patients. We're going to set up special units. So we caught them in so many lies. It was weird. They called these meetings together, and then we got tricked. I mean, it was just like so obvious what they were doing. And they set up these makeshift units, and we were told everybody has to take a turn and go over to that unit and work. What I learned was my fellow nurses became fearful. So much so that they made excuses for not going over. So my name happens to be a W, my real last name, like, work name. So it took, they were going by alphabetical order. So by the time they get to me, it's going to take a while. And I was called one day at home before my shift. Oh, Jennifer, you're going to have to go over to the unit. And I was just thinking, wow, it was so soon. It was like the first nurse, and I'm thinking, how did they get all the way to me? I figured I'd have some time. And I learned that a lot of nurses, they made excuses. Like one nurse said, oh, I have a grandchild that lives with me, and it was just, they accepted the excuses. So I had to be the first nurse from my unit to go over. I wasn't afraid. My main thing was like, just provide me with scrubs so I don't wear my normal scrubs. I don't want to take it home. So that was the only thing I requested. And they did it, no problem. I went over and, we were all shields and it looked like a hazmat type of situation. We didn't know what we were dealing with, but I wasn't fearful. That was the weirdest thing. I wasn't fearful. I was more so in an observing mode. So I was tapping in probably intuitively, like, what is going on? I would assess those patients and something seemed off. They seemed like zombies when I first took care of the very first patients. And I was like, this is weird. So then I was called to go up to New York City to work right away. And I took the offer to go up. And I knew it was for a bigger reason. And once I got to New York, that's when I went into total observation. I was really highly observant. And I was tapping in, and the alarm bells were going off. It was not a fear, because I would walk around the city, and back then it was a ghost town. If you've ever been to New York, can you imagine, like, the streets? You would see hardly any cars on certain streets. People were inside, they were fearful. And I was like, New Yorkers are tough people. Like, what's going on? They're really scared. You could feel the fear. It was palpable. And that is always like a deterrent to me, because I don't like fear, and I don't like people that want me to join in with fear. So I would go around, I never wore a mask and everything. And I'm on the bus, and I would take pictures to share on social media. And you know what the first comments were? Where's your mask? And I'm like, did you see my picture? There's nobody on the bus. It's just me and the bus driver. And your first question is, where is your mask? So I knew there was something going on with people. And, I worked up there, and I quickly discerned that something is not honest right now, because the TV was constantly on. If you go in a patient's room, they have CNN and everything on, and you're thinking, this reality is not matching up with what they're saying on TV. And I would try to have conversations with other nurses, and you know what I noticed? They wouldn't want to talk to me about it. I would just, like, if I got a nurse colleague, like one-on-one, like say in the nursing lounge, and I'd say, hey, what do you think about all this? Do you think this is really? And they would I could see them behind their mask, their eyes would get big, and they're like, I don't want to talk to you about this, and it was weird. I was like, I felt like the only person. It was so lonely. It was very lonely. And because I didn't wear a mask, and I was like this rebel, I noticed people started to distance themselves from me. Like, the rapport that I had with people, it was destroyed. Some of the nurses, we would get like Uber Eats, and we would go in together and get that. I would notice, like, they would do it among themselves, and I'd walk in and see them all eating and having a good time, and they would exclude me. And I was like, wow. And this is because I'm not wearing 2-3 masks. I've instantly become like a pariah, Yeah. So that for me was the biggest wake-up call, is that we were also, another thing I didn't like is that, and normally people would like this, whenever we would go in the hospitals at the time, they would have all this fanfare. They'd have banners like, you are heroes, and they'd have balloon arches, and restaurants were bringing food, catering food to us. We were these big heroes on the front line. And, I didn't fall for it. They were giving us trinkets and little gifts and all kinds of things. And something felt very disingenuous about it. So I felt like something's not right about this. And, later, now the nurses that are waking up to it, they're like, oh, last year we were heroes. And now this year, if we don't go along with everything, we're not heroes. We're like anti-heroes. Isn't that weird? Like,
yeah. And and we had the because the British system is the NHS, the National Health Service. So what they had, and the same with me as well. One, it didn't really make sense, and there were so many other things going on in my life at the time. But I remember having a comment, speaking to a friend of mine who's a vegan, and we'd kind of heard about this thing that was going on. There'd be like the odd one person in the street with a mask, and we'd be like, what are they doing? And we'd heard this thing about this whole bat stuff, and we'd be like, well, it serves them right for eating animals, because we don't eat animals, so good, like, it serves them right. But then after a while, like, Boris would come on TV, and we'd be talking about all of this we might have to do this lockdown, and people couldn't go here or there, and it just didn't, for me it was just like, oh, I can't, because I don't really watch TV, so then to sit down and watch television feels like a fiction anyway, well, it is, here we go, but at the time I'm just like, it doesn't, it's something about it, the same thing, something about it is like, it's not sticking. I feel like I'm having almost like an out of body experience in this whole thing. I'm watching everyone rush around and do this stuff, but I can't buy into it. It's like, I don't feel like it is. And the same thing with London as well. And I was up until I think the 23rd is when we went into lockdown here. And that last week as well, it was just like the center of town was really like center of London, where you see like thousands of people getting off the train in the morning, all rushing like ants in the same direction, barely anyone there, sitting in coffee shops where people are just like, like everyone's talking about this under like hushed tones. They changed because at one point, to be green, you were bringing in your own coffee cup. To you get a little bit of money if you're buying a coffee. Suddenly they stopped that because that wasn't the thing to do, and it was just this kind of whole weirdness. And then they did this kind of lockdown thing, but what they did here to kind of say yes to the heroes was all the kids they're all at home now, drawing rainbows, putting them in the window, and every Thursday evening at 8 p.m. people would stand on their doorstep and get pans and wooden spoons and clap and bang and clap and bang. And I never did it. And I know, and the thing is, where I was staying, because I was like staying at a friend, because it was like, okay, all the work that I had, because I was commission based, just like literally went down. I'm like, great, okay, so what am I going to earn? But I was just like, I can't do this. And I know I look like the most selfish person in the world, but I can't, I just, it's not in me to do that, because something about it isn't, and I've never been one to go, everyone's going, let's go this way. And I'll be like, why? So, but everyone's like, it didn't make sense. And I couldn't work out why it didn't make sense. And I was just watching all of these things happen. Stickers appearing on the ground, and people starting to stand away from each other, and just, like you say, act really weird and bizarre, and start to watch the TV all the time. And I'm just like, for some reason then I just felt like a gear change in me, and I need to learn some stuff. And it wasn't even like I was researching the whole COVID situation. It was like, I just need to go into overdrive about learning things. And it just pulled everything together, because I've always been somebody who's had all these kind of alternative takes on situations, but then not, what do I do with that information? Because I was always the odd one out who thought that way for the most part. But suddenly it all kind of like came in and gelled together, and the story made sense. But there was still this stuff going on in the middle that didn't make sense.
Right.
It's like, how do we put these together? Then out of that, then you start to find a community of people that think like you. It took a while, because there was still so many people buying into it. But then there started to be this kind of coalescence of people who were true and were learning new stuff, and like, we're just literally going, oh my God, we've literally just come out of the pods, like, literally like the Matrix. And we just really started to learn what the world was about and what was happening. And it turned it into a beautiful thing, even though there was this madness going on, and still to this day. And now the screws are getting tighter. I don't know how you feel about where we are right now with everything. And especially, I suppose, from the point of view with all the drama that went on politically, especially in America, because the world was watching America, all the people that were paying attention were taking really just eyes on America in terms of watching the political drama that was going on. And what a drama, what a drama it was, just up and down. And I spent more time learning about American politics for a while than I even was spending time looking at what was happening in this country, because it seemed it was going to be led that way. And now I don't know. It's like, where are we at? I mean, we're watching we're watching your
Oh my goodness. It's a clown show. Wow.
when have things ever been so preposterous?
Never. I mean, even when we had George Bush Jr., who was, you know, his narrative in the media was one to make fun of. The media always, you know, oh, he doesn't know how to say words correctly. He doesn't know geography. You know, he really didn't win. You know, all these things, you know, that he was known by. And then to have 9/11 happen during his presidency, it was really strange, you know. But there was never the air of such like altered reality like it is now. We knew something was going on, a lot of us, but what they did was we got whipped up into this like patriotism, also war, like the drums of war. Yeah, go get the people that took down the towers kind of thing. So they got us like really focused on, we need to strike back. You know, we need to be on one accord because we've been attacked on our own soil. So that narrative was powerful to get us distracted, and we didn't know what they were really doing. Right. Some people did know, like you were saying, there are always people that kind of know, and they're trying to holler from the wilderness, like, this isn't what they're saying. And, you know, we're like, shut up, we've been attacked, you know, and you don't want to hear those people because they look crazy. Now, you know, we understand what looking crazy is like. And there were people that were red pilling right after the 9/11 thing. They were like, wait a minute, there are some things that we should step back, ask questions. Something is not making sense about the narrative. But the fear and the fact that, you know, they really built up this terrorism narrative. Oh, we have these people that don't like our way of life and they want to take it from us. And that was strange. But again, it took the clown show, like the way they were teasing George W. Bush Jr., and he became sort of like this wartime president. So it gave him this appearance of seriousness, and he had a cabinet of people that were taken very serious, and including Condoleezza Rice, who I think was really the power behind that administration when I did the research on her. But this is a time that I have never witnessed in my life, you know, knowing about different leaders in America. We've had other presidents like Gerald Ford, and he used to fall a lot. You know, I remember like as a kid, they would always make fun of him. He fell, he was kind of clumsy, but it wasn't like it is now. This is like an insult to your intelligence, what is happening now, because, you know, they have things that maybe Biden said, like little sound bites, and I can't even believe it. I'm thinking this has to be like a Saturday Night Live kind of thing, like parody. And then I'll source it and I'm thinking, oh my God, he really did say that. And it's so shocking that things have devolved to the point that they have. And he is being seen as the leader of our nation internationally. And I watch news that comes out of other countries, and we're a laughing stock, you know, of the world right now. You know, it's really embarrassing, and it's hard to really speak to it anymore, because I thought things would go a certain way, because it's very obvious that something happened. He was not supposed to be in the White House. I mean, everybody knows it's like the elephant in the room. He could not have gotten all of these votes, you know? So what happened? And people know what happened. It's obvious now. But the resolution of it, I thought would happen, you know, because it's so clear. But like you said, we have a ways to go to, I guess, get to resolution. You know,
And it's interesting, and like you said as well, like, because at the time as well, everyone was so many people watching outside of the US who were just like hanging on, like hoping, and then we're like, no, but there is no way they're going to see all the way through, because it's like you say, it's so blatantly obvious. And it wasn't even like we were like heavily political. It's like, this is just clearly somebody, this is like clearly like a cheat. It's like there is no way you're going to see it all the way through to the whole ceremony and everything. And when it happened, it kind of hit really hard. It hit really hard people who didn't even live in the States, and it wasn't going to necessarily directly affect them. I remember how the feeling after all of that, I'm like, why do we feel so flat? It's just like, it was literally like, what just happened? How could it possibly be? And I suppose, had things have gone the right way, or the way that we felt the results should have gone, you wouldn't be seeing what you're seeing now. True. Not that it's not without pain, people are feeling the pain of it, but it's got to the point where it's getting so ridiculous that it's almost helping people get exposed, especially the all the crookedness, all the deception, and also the way that media is really just playing with people's minds, because they are the last defense, really. They're the ones that are perpetrating this, because without the media, none of this could happen. On a global scale, none of this could have happened, because people are just plugged in, and if you're plugged into the wrong thing, it's going to be sending you in a completely different way. And especially when you start to, and for me as well, really research technology and the strength of technology, and how technology and media has been weaponized to steer people completely off the scent. And not even just in recent times, over the years, where it was more of a drip feed. Now it's just a tsunami of lies. but people are still getting swept up with it. But I'm just wondering, like, with all of that, are people still how does it feel to be there, to have that going on in your leadership? And I say that in quotation marks. And for the people who, because I know some people who still really supported it and felt that they were coming out of a period of darkness, or because they kind of got led to believe that one person was the villain and one person was the hero. I mean, who knows? We don't know. We could all there could still be more revelations at this point in time. I'm just like, I'm open to it still going another way still. But up until that point, I'd get messages sent to me from family members about, especially when they found Black conservatives.
Oh gosh!
And they were so mortally offended that you'd have Black people, Black families going en masse to Trump rallies, and they'd be sending me things going, look at this, how terrible it is. And I'd get them, I kind of coax them into telling me what they wanted me to see. I knew completely, but I'd be like, well, why did you send me this? What is it that you want me to see? I'm like, I want you to tell me. I want to hear it out of your own mouth, exactly what you think is going on here and why you care. These are people in the UK that were getting concerned about stuff like this, and we're having this conversation. It's not even our political structure. It's like, why are we having a conversation about this? But it affected everyone worldwide, and it just shows the power of the media, how they'd created so much division and hatred. That people who were not even affected by it had an opinion, and such a strong opinion. And then when you ask them their reasons for, like, why do you hate that guy so much? It was like the same reasons, this and this. Okay, give me examples of that. No.
Radio silence, right? Yeah. Amazing.
We really need to examine what we think racism is, and we need to kind of like come over that now, really get over that, because the people who are perpetuating the idea of racism are people of color, people in our own community who come forward and keep reminding us how terrible things are for us. Are you sure? It's like, oh yeah, you told me, yeah, so it is, you know, and look for examples of that. And if I think about the period of time, I'd say it was about 2-3 years ago, where I kind of thought that I didn't know enough Black history, that I hadn't read enough of the right books, that I hadn't really got involved in the cause. I wasn't conscious enough. So I started to kind of educate myself on these things and read those books and follow those people on social media. And it just made me really angry and hyper vigilant and looking for these perceived microaggressions that were being thrown on me all the time. It wasn't, you know, but and when I kind of woke up to the fact of that, then I realized, I'm like, hang on, this is not me. This is not who I am. I don't get triggered by all of these things. Exactly. I don't push back on it. And the same with women against men as well. Yes. And how that was being used.
What you bring up about the whole, I'll call it like third wave or fourth wave feminism. I don't know where we are with it all. Yeah. But I recall, and this is interesting, being that you are a melanated woman, it seems that we're used as either the muscle or the face of a movement. Right. And it gives the movement legitimacy. And I'll just say, like, if you remember Anita Hill, do you remember the whole Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill debacle? It was so embarrassing what went on in this country. But as a fallout from that whole Anita Hill, I'll tell you this is when the whole aspect of men even complimenting women became weaponized. Men had to really be very careful. It was like all these landmines, like in the corporate world, a man couldn't just say, oh, you look nice in that suit you're wearing. A woman could literally take that compliment and run to HR and say that she felt uncomfortable. And she felt whatever she was feeling, it didn't matter what that man really meant. It was only incumbent on how a woman felt. And that was elevated. That was all you needed. The man's whole life and everything could be ruined very easily. And, you know, we knew, like, when you're trying to be fair and balanced, you know that these things happen, you know, sexual harassment happens on the jobs. And it was something that was just, you know, tolerated and accepted and hidden for so long. But they went totally the extreme to try to correct it. So that's when this other form of feminism just came. I just saw it blossom. And I had lived in New York City around, I'm trying to think, like maybe 5-6 years ago. And I worked at one of the Ivy League colleges, Columbia. And one day I was going to lunch and I happened to see all these young college men, and they have mattresses on their backs and they're walking around, they're stumbling with their bags, their backpacks, and they're trying to walk around, you know, with these mattresses. And I didn't know what was going on this particular day. I'm like, I had to stop one of the students, like, what are you doing? Why are you guys doing this? And they said, oh, we are feminist and we're supporting women right now and date rape that happens on the campus. And I was like, oh my God, because date rape became they obsessed over it. Like if you walk down the hallways and you like bulletin boards, everything was date rape, date rape, date rape. And I was thinking, now I know it's a problem, but it can't be this big of a problem. It was just so overblown. And I knew in my gut something was wrong. So I got to see how men just became diminished, you know, and women became what we hated, you know, like they became the oppressors in a way,
Yeah.
And I watched that happen as it was kind of like that Anita Hill thing started, that whole Me Too kind of, in a way. I kind of see that they used her as a figurehead, and then the Me Too movement was actually started by a Black woman, and it was usurped by the Hollywood elites, and it was used to gain more political power. And when you looked into, like you said, like who's behind this, you got to see Oprah gave cover for Harvey Weinstein. A lot of people did. They gave him cover. Oprah was actually helping to feed younger Hollywood starlets into the Harvey Weinstein kind of casting couch. So, you're thinking, wait a minute, I thought you were a defender of women. You're actually a predator. And it was a lot of people that gave him cover, including Michelle Obama, all kinds of people. They were elevating this guy, yet they knew what he was doing, So that's very hurtful to realize, like, they literally use melanated women to start these movements and give it the muscle. And then it becomes something else. It's totally hijacked and usurped for a very nefarious reason, So I was really like stepping back and looking at what is happening with this feminism, and how are we really progressing as a group? Are we becoming now the bullies, where men can't even, they don't know what to do. They're being told being a man is wrong. You have to tap into your feminine, and men are being told that, like, they're not wired the same way we are. And it's not fair to want men to be the butt of the joke. When you watch sitcoms, it's always the dad, he's stupid, the kids are smarter than him. And when you try to be fair, you're like, this isn't a good perception of men. This is not fair. I've had to navigate that and try to speak about it, and you become very unpopular when you just try to, like, can we have a dialogue about it? Can we find some further, like, deeper truths, like what's really happening? Are we being deceived? Are we being used? Even with the aspect of, when America just went into flames because of police brutality. I mean, we know that there are incidences of police brutality, but when you really look at it and take the political and racial aspect away and look at it in fairness, it's not common for Black people to be abused by police. It really isn't. Like, the encounters that they have, the numbers are just not there.
Yeah.
So they'd have to take one incident and really, like, the media blows it up. So at a certain point, I couldn't even drive and take road trips. And I used to love to get on the open road and take road trips. But my mindset was so afraid that, what if because I have a, lead foot, as they say. I drive kind of fast. And if I'm listening to music, I won't realize how fast I'm going. I'm like, I know me, I might speed. And what if I get stopped? Will I become a statistic? And this fear was so overblown. And it was something that even my friends that had Black sons, they would just commiserate in this fear. And one day I was sitting in the kitchen with some friends that had Black sons, and they were just talking about, oh my God, I can't deal with when my son goes out and I don't think he's going to come back home. And I stopped and I said, this is not good. I think we're taking part in a massive sort of, like, this is like a ritual, like a traumatic thing that we're collectively feeding into. Do you think? And just by asking that question, they just, like, hissed at me, like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, this is powerful what the media is doing to us. It's horrible. Once you pull away and you realize this is programming me I got to stop this, because you won't live a full life if you're just traumatized and re-traumatized, And back to Oprah, have you noticed that the whole slave narrative is always like Oprah is behind it all? Every time there's a movie about slavery, it's always like Oprah, and she has been used as this figurehead to just continue to traumatize Black people and to continue putting guilt on non-Black people,
Yeah. And it's going to be so hard for people to, especially the Black community, who have still got this wound of being continually traumatized by oppression and by the target, how terrible and targeted we are as a community, and how unsafe the world is for us. And because you have these millionaires and billionaires that are paid to tell us, and what I really saw, because then I was like paying so much attention, especially to the States, is when the George Floyd incident happened. Now, to this day, I don't know what the truth of that situation is as well, how much of a, what the truth of the situation is like who died, who did not die, or whatever like that. But it was almost like it happened on clockwork, because if you kind of look back to what had happened the previous weeks, it was almost like you could almost write it. When it happened, I'm like, I started to dig around, and like I need to know that this happened. I wanted it to be proved right. And the more I looked into it, it just wasn't making sense. It's like you had all these kind of like mobile videos. It just turned up in a way that was really unnatural for me. It turned up on social media in a way that was like, hang on a minute, where's all this come from? It was just all, and at that time I still had a few blue checks that I was following, so it really kind of just hit my feed really quickly. And then of course all of the people who were fans of that then started to kind of turn it around. But with situations like that, once you realize the players and the people whose role it is to perpetuate this story keep turning up, it's like, who was at the funeral, who came on, which lawyer turned up, which, every time you get good old Al Sharpton turn up off his private jet, that you're not dealing with reality here. None of it was making sense. But it came worldwide, and it came over here. And what I noticed about it is it wasn't just agitating Black people. It then started to agitate college, like university age, middle class white kids that suddenly got involved in this whole thing, and they were going to protest. And I remember speaking to one girl about it, and she was so afraid of the whole COVID thing and was on a mask and everything, and was convinced that people were asymptomatic. And I'd been to one of the first protests like a couple of weeks beforehand. And I'd say, well, I've been out and, I'm good, but it's like, yeah, but you might be an asymptomatic, she was buying into the entire story of the whole thing. But then she decided that she was going to go into central London and go to the first big Black Lives Matter thing they had there. And I'm like, well, why are you going? And she didn't really have an answer other than she felt it was the right thing to do. It was like, the right thing for what? Like, tell me, I'm a Black woman, I'm not going. So if I'm not going, and am I not more justified to be there? Shouldn't I be more angry? Why are you going? And you could see again how the media had kind of perpetuated this thing. But there are still people that I know, grown people, who are in and kind of pulled into the whole righteousness of this movement of this Black Lives Matter and that whole thing. And by not paying attention, you realize it's people pay fractions fractions of moments of attention. They just get a soundbite of something triggers their emotion. They get a bit of, they're in trauma, they get a bit of something drops in and it sits there, and then that can be weaponized because they're not paying attention all the time. They're not researching, they're not connecting the dots, they're not seeing where people are from or who's being paid to perpetuate this thing, so that they can keep going on about the story without all of the information. And those unfortunately are the ones that are being led because they know that low information people, that don't feel that they have the time to look, but are the most traumatized, the most mind controlled.
Yes, absolutely. And they keep us so distracted, because there was one after another and you couldn't even recover enough to try to research it, and you're busy working. But a lot of us lost our jobs. So then we had time on our hands to just question things wait a minute, what am I doing? And it really helped people to come out of that, that mind control and start to question these things. And why am I doing this? Am I doing it to appear more righteous to people? And especially the white guilt, the people that, you'll see them with the Black Lives Matter signs in their window, their homes. If I drive around certain neighborhoods that have the sort of liberals that have money, and, they got the Black Lives Matter in their windows of their mansions. And you're thinking, do you really care about this issue truly? What's going on? Why do you have to let us know by putting this in your window? This is ridiculous. It's like a pandering, and it feels really very disingenuous. And I don't appreciate that, because if they really care, then they will do things in a different way to help. If they feel that injustice is going on, they won't do it in this outward, I just want to have symbolic things, but they'll do things to really change the situation. And you don't sense that that's what they're doing. They just want to, post something on Instagram, looking like they went to a protest or something. And it's really, it's sad. But I think a lot of people did wake up to the fact that they were being played by this whole narrative, because like you said, things just started to break down with the narrative. Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense, and a lot of the blue check marks, even though they were really active, they lost their influence. If you've noticed, it was, I don't know at what point it was, if it was the massive quarantine and lockdown, where you kind of realize maybe we don't need celebrities so much, maybe we're the celebrities, because people started doing TikTok dances and they became viral. And it was it drowned out the celebrities, because people realize you can be a star and you're just an everyday person. You can be an influencer. And so now that toppled the idols. Who cares anymore? You didn't have Beyonce shaking around on stages around the world because everybody was locked down. It leveled the playing field. Didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So that was actually one of those, it was a good thing that came out of something bad, is that it helped people to see they don't really need celebrities, and who cares what they think. So that's one of the positives that came from that. And so it's harder to keep these lies propped up if you don't have the blue check marks. And I'm not talking about C and D list celebrities, but I'm talking the level of Oprah, Beyonce, and these people. I check Beyonce's feed every now and then, and something's weird about her Instagram feed. Something's just so weird, and I've noticed it. It's an intuitive thing. She was sounding a little bit political and going along with the narratives, but right now it's just, you don't feel that they're using her like they could. I have my theories about why, but
well, I've got my theories about many of them as well, really. And when, especially if I see because after a while you kind of look, you squint a little bit and go, it's just big, especially somebody like Madonna.
Oh, wow.
And just in recent times, it's like, because I'm not following her all the time, like I used to, and I grew up with her, like from beginning days, from Like a Virgin days, from Borderline days, from Lucky Star, from the kernel of her beginning before she blew up into this whole thing.
Right.
But then looking at it now, looking at whoever that is, because personally, once we start to really understand that we've built our reality on images, and for the most part, many of these people who unless you go and see them live, you don't even know who that is.
True.
We've given so much of ourselves externally to these figures, and for the most part we've only ever seen them on a screen.
True.
And we've given that, and they could be anybody, they could be anything, they could be, technology is such that we don't know what we're looking at nowadays. Technology is so advanced that but especially when you start to kind of go down rabbit holes and really look into public figures from 50 and 60 years ago, you realize these games have been being played for so long that you have to reshape your entire belief system around who you thought people were.
True.
And now that we have the technology, and now everyone allows themselves to be entrained daily, by the minute, almost to the point where you feel you can't survive without these things that are just constantly feeding you a version of reality based on who we think these people are, and the whole emotional attachment and investment that we've given them. And then we've allowed these people to kind of lead us to this point. But for those, more and more people are becoming aware, especially I think now with this push on these mandates, that it's not making sense. Like suddenly it's like, who made you PhD? Who made you a virologist? You're meant to be a singer, an actress, and I'm hoping that will be the last bastion of people really just going, make it make sense for those who allow those things to make sense, because that's what's going to save us, is to stop being external. And I think it's a real time for introspection and connecting with some sort of spirituality and sense of spiritual direction, and how we're going to create the world going forward. And I mean, I'm a PK, so I was a pastor's kid from day dot, and I literally went around the world and went into so many different modalities. But what I've found is, especially over the past year and a half, is how pertinent the Bible is more than ever before. To go back into things like prayer and looking, and without it being religion. And I think what triggers people so much is the fact that they've kind of tied religion with Bible or prayer or anything like that. And still we don't know, because we've got so much to uncover about what is true and what is in the Bible and what isn't in the Bible. And there's so much that we need to find out, is what's been omitted. But anything I'd say to anybody really now is, anything that people have such a really knee-jerk reaction against, if someone says like the Bible and people are triggered out of it, it's like, then there's something we need to go past, because you've been set up to have a pushback on something like that, so there must be something there.
That's a good point.
In all of these things, it's like, no, it's like, well, all the more reason to step towards it and step through it, so that we can find what it is to get us through. It's like kind words, guidance, whatever it is. I mean, what are you using to keep yourself sane? I know you're not having like breakdowns or not going into denial, but we all use tools and ways of working through all of this situation, and especially when you contemplate how we're going to get through, especially these next. I really feel that we're going to have to go through some stuff that is going to be really eye-opening and heart-opening for a lot of us, and heartbreaking for a lot of us. Yeah. How are you preparing yourself? How do you fortify yourself on a daily basis for this?
Well, I'm going back to basics, and like you having the background that you had, although I'm not a PK, I was raised in like a Baptist, kind of background. My mother being Baptist, and then, my grandmother, and being in church from a young child and learning about end time eschatology. I mean, my mother worked for a Christian, like an evangelical society. So I would go to her job and help out, as a little kid, they'd have me doing envelopes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And she would bring home a lot of literature. One of the things that I read was The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey. And that got me interested in reading, like, the book of Revelation and Isaiah and all the, like, Ezekiel. I wanted to read all the supernatural, like, end time stuff. So I had that early interest. Mm-hmm. Although it scared me a little bit, it didn't scare me. I was excited, like, I want to get to the good stuff. If we have to go through this terrible time to get to the good stuff, I sensed that as a child, that it had to be a rough and bumpy kind of, turbulence to get to the great times. So for me now, I mean, I've fallen into so much deception over the course of my life. Even though I had this foundation, I strayed away from it so much. I was always curious. So I got into different things, dabbling and whatever. I feel this need to get back to basics, like in every aspect, even down to what I eat. I want things to have seeds in it, okay? I don't want seedless grapes anymore. Can I get like original, real things? So for me, the Bible, even though it does cause this recoiling for people, and I've even said, oh, they've lied to us, they've tampered with it, we don't have books that we should have, the Book of Enoch and all this stuff. But still, I cannot deny that by me being presented with this early in my life, that it's an anchor. It's the only thing I know. Like, if I've gone through all this deception and dabbled and everything, it's like I come back to my anchor. I come back to the basics of my foundations, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So for me, this is what I'm currently doing. It's not something I can just say, oh, I just came back and here I am. Glory, hallelujah. This is a process for me because I've gone down so many avenues, even with the whole Black liberation, kind of thing, where they say, why do we have a white Jesus with blue eyes and this stuff and blonde hair? And you just start, I've gotten angry over the years, like, what are they doing? Everything's a lie. I have to get to a point where I can find the truth again, So I'm getting back to prayer. I'm not yet there with the reading of the Bible like I used to, because I've read the Bible daily. I mean, I had so many Bibles and you could tell I read them. They looked like war torn, you know what I'm saying? And I need to get back to studying it from from this standpoint now. But that's what I'm doing. That's bringing me some level of peace. And I'm shedding my idols, I just have this theory that humans, we just have this, it's a weakness in us to idolize people and maybe things. And it's a constant fight, I think, to let your idols fall. They should not be on a pedestal. No one should. And if you are Christian, and you're getting back to your roots, it's like only God is elevated. So it's a constant reminder. And that's what I'm finding is that is my anchor, that is my North Star, my foundation. So it's just getting back to basics. That's for me, and simplifying and slow living, not living for anybody, which I didn't do a lot of that anyway. I was always like kind of odd in that way. I could fall into like peer things, but then I was always the one like, I want to wear this. I don't care if they think it's weird. I like it, so I could kind of be an individual, but I would fall into that sort of peer stuff, a little bit here and there. But I just, for me, that's what's helping me to uncover the truth. And it's a constant process because it's so much deception, and it's like layers and layers of unpeeling to get to a truth, the truth rather, because I only think it's only one truth. I mean, I know they say your truth, my truth, her truth. That's like, not possible to have so much truth. Truth in itself has to be like truth. Okay. Right. So that's where I am with it, is back to basics.
Yeah, my truth. It's a passive aggressive way of saying I'm not being funny, but you just pull up a litany of like insults and anything that you want to follow it with. But yeah, no, I get that. It's because it helps you stand strong, and there's some powerful there's some powerful verses in there as well, and when you read them, you just, okay, I'll take that on. And even all of these quotes that kind of float around the internet that are attributed to 5 and 6 and 7 different people, and no one really knows who says them. But if you just kind of look at certain verses, even if you took the verse away, like the kind of the reference of the book and the verse, and just had it out as words on some of them, just to meditate on those words and to live by those words, or to just kind of have that as your direction for that point for that moment, is fortifying in itself. Because I think this is what we really need at the moment, is like a thought that we can kind of take with us. And as I'm saying this, I always remember my mum had this little box that had these tiny little cards in them, all different colors and everything. And we'd always have to take a little card before we left the house and just read the verse and meditate on it.
Wow, that's nice.
And just kind of read the verse, and there was a little prayer, and you just kind of spend a moment where you just, before we walked out, and that's what we would take out into the world on the day. And I think that's what we need, because we're also going to really need to be able to be self-directed and sovereign and know what we stand for, because there are so many challenges with who we are and what we're standing for. Because I think the reason why so much of this deception is working is because so few people stand for anything really, or know what they stand for. So if you don't have any conviction or any direction as to what it is you are about, then you go where the wind blows you. I'm trying to remember the quote. It was a Jim Rohn quote. It's like, if you don't have anything set up for yourself, people don't really have that much set up for you anyway. The same is a kind of version of, if you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. He had a really succinct way of saying it. He's had a way about him, the way that he used to throw his lines off Jim Rohn. And also as well, once we start to come out on the other side of the bump, that I feel that we're about to kind of go into the last tunnel, where we're really going to feel whatever tribulation, however that's going to play out, is then the ones of us who are seeing what's going on and learning about what's going on, and are dealing with the grieving that we're having to do with our idols and the realities and all the things that we thought the world were. Somehow we're still standing, somehow we're still connected, is that we know that we want to create something on the other side. And the healing that is going to be needed on the other side of that as well. And I remember speaking to you before, and you were talking about how you wanted to work on that side of things and create on that. I just want you to share that again. That's what I'm leading to.
Sure. Well, that aspect of being on the other side and helping, like, I used to, when I was really into the church and, my Christian faith, that was one of the things, like it would appear in songs and everything, like, Lord, send me, I'll be your hands, I'll be your feet, just send me, I'll be your mouth, whatever you want me to say, I'll be a vessel, open vessel for you. So I would like to be part of helping us to get back to sanity. And to me, sanity looks like being self-sufficient in the sense of not where you don't depend on God. I'm not, saying that, but where we can grow our own foods, where we understand our health. It's no need to run to a doctor just because you feel a pain or you have a fever, things like that. Just getting back to slow living, understanding truth and the body and the whole connection, body, mind, soul, and having that integrity, so I would like to just help with even building communities like that. I could foresee having communities where people could learn how to be almost a human, because I'm finding that's something, it's like basic. People have forgotten what it is to be a human being. They don't even want to hug you or touch you or anything right now. And it's like, wow, look at what's going to happen with the children coming up. You see pictures of the kids and they're in these plastic. I saw something from another country where the children mask and in plastic enclosures and they're playing separated from another child. What is that going to do to the future generations? This is traumatic. And I read that the trauma that they have already endured, it's going to take time to heal them, So I want to be a part of helping with healing the people and being God's vessel for that, love and just, it's simple, like I said, just getting back to basics, not all the artificialness of everything. I have these like visions. I can just like, the tiny house revolution where you have people living in community. I see people all through Philadelphia. They're like zombies. They have this addiction to the fentanyl and everything. And they're just literally, it looks like Michael Jackson's Thriller, these people. What's going to happen to these people? We need to teach them how to be human again, how to have meaning. How do we put meaning back into life where people have a purpose? Because a job is not a purpose. We found out from everybody losing their jobs. It's like, well, that's not my identity, obviously. So where do we find our identity? And helping people to really question and come to those conclusions and awakening to that. What is the real purpose? Why are you here? Let's plug into that and grow community, where we are connected. All the people that have fought to divide us, I see them going away. So we have to find connection again and not all this like gender war, race war, and craziness.
Whatever gender is nowadays.
Right. Yeah, that's become it's like whatever, right?
It has, the more you see something like that, it has to be end times. It's like when you're questioning that craziness, right? When you're questioning facts, irrefutable facts, then you're crazy. And we can't it's just like we can't go past that. But I hear you on the helping people and the helping of getting them to answer the questions, like, what do you think you're here for? And so few people even go near that question because they've been so distracted with the need to work to pay bills, or because their job, or so busy by all of these things. And then when they have a day or so, they just want to sit in front of the TV or go shopping, or when all of those things go away and you're just at home with yourself and you don't have any needs. You might not be living it large, but when you don't have any needs, so there's no need for you to go out. If money were no object is the usual one, what would you do? What would you do for the world? And yeah, I see a time over this hump when this craziness has to go away, because it's imploding in on itself already. How much crazier does it have to get? I mean, it's probably going to get crazier, but it's laughable now, and more people are seeing it. And it, almost like you think it's just getting more and more crazy in order for people, the ones that are going to pop out of the spell,
Right.
and be like, where was that? And what is available for us as a different world, so that we can get on with healing. And the same with the children. It's heartbreaking to see them, their formative years, and they're just looking around the world and not being able to comprehend it, not being able to put language to it. And that's when the trauma is more deeply embedded, because you can't explain it. If we're a bit older, so we've got the language to talk about these things. But when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, and you just see the world change overnight, and you don't comprehend why it is like that, and all you feel is the fear,
right,
and being told to be fearful. Those are the most impressionable moments in your life, those first 7 years, where everything that goes in forms the extent of your life.
Right.
Exactly. That's the heartbreaking thing, because people are just so unaware of what they're imprinting into their child's minds in the name of safety. So whatever that looks like is something that I want to be part of, just to kind of get people to repattern those things, and also find a sense of forgiveness. That's going to be hard. Forgive yourself for being taken in, but the illusion was so good.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's a good point. The forgiving of ourselves, because they say it's easier to fool someone than to kind of convince a person that they've been fooled. And that, that's wrapped up in ego. And, we're shedding our ego. A lot of us are, and we're shedding a lot of things, like what you said. Like, I'm thinking back to like even quarantine time last year, when people were doing these TikTok videos from their home. And it's like, some people were having fashion shows, Carol, where they were like putting on their clothes and having their designer handbags in their living room. And it's like, you have nowhere to go. You have no one to impress. You might have a new car in your garage, but you can't even go out and show off, because the restaurants were closed. This was closed. So it really did do some good for people. I really think people came to that knowledge that why do I get caught up in this stuff? Why do I take Instagram pictures and I have my Louis Vuitton bag like on the table, and I have to have it in the shot, so people know I have the latest Louis. Red bottom shoes, you're in slippers, So a lot of this was shed, whether we liked it or not. It was a great lesson. And I believe that people have, they have blossomed and awakened more and more, due to seeing that this, it goes back to like our background, when they say, who's the God of this world? And I think for a lot of us, we don't know how to look at the world and the earth as being different. The world is a system. It is the matrix, but the earth is totally different than that. So giving up the world is very hard, because people will exchange their soul for the world. So we know it's a great pull. It draws, it really, like you said, it's the illusion is so good. And when you wake up to the world and you realize the God of the world is nothing that you want to be a part of, then you have to watch the world fade away. It has to fall, and it has to go through that cycle. And it is going to be painful for people that are so like they're grabbing onto this dying thing. And you cannot give it CPR. It's far past,
Dead already.
It's dead. It's flatlining. And now we have to have a proper send-off, and it's just the unknown. It's the unknown on the other side. People fear, like, what are we going to replace this stuff with?
It can feel a bit scary, but then at the same time you think, okay, what are we going to replace it with? And it's like, well, what do you want? What are we going to create?
Right. And that's powerful. Like, that's beautiful that we get to co-create, like however you want to look at it. It just comes back down to, if we didn't have all of the illusion and the need to impress people with things that really aren't truly our soul's desire, our heart's desire, then taking all that away, a lot of people, they may want to do things that they would never be able to voice to their friends. I had a colleague who committed suicide. I used to work in big pharma, and I worked with a partner. They would partner us up. He was a wealthy man. His father was a big time physician. His brothers were very big in the pharmaceutical world. Yet he went along with trying to keep up with the men in his family. But you know what he really liked? When we would be alone, like maybe at lunch, or we're driving to a client, because we would often like pair up, he would tell me that he had a falcon, and he was like a falconer, and he loved animals. He had a cat that he just adored. And, I often asked him, do you think you might have wanted to be a veterinarian maybe, or some kind of, person? And he did. But he had to go along with a life that just totally was not what he wanted. And he married a woman who was, paired up with him from a similar background. And she just spent his money. Whereas he came from a rich family, but it wasn't like his family fed him money. He had to get out there and work. And he was working, and this woman was spending beyond what they had. So he was always so stressed out, and he committed suicide. And, I thought back and I was like, it was just so sad to me to see this person and what he endured, just not being able to be true to what he wanted, and that's a lot of people's story. It doesn't have to end in suicide, but that's an extreme example. But imagine if we didn't need to keep up, with the world. Again, it's the world system. It's not real. And it's not organic, for one.
No.
So it'll be really good to come out on the other side of it and shed the world,
And be able to tell the story for years and years to come. That's the thing that I always keep in the back of my head, is when all this is done, then years, 10, 20, 30, however long, that I'll be that person, old woman in the corner who keeps telling the story of 2020 over and over and over again, to the point where it's just, okay, yeah, it was this, it was that, but I want it to be a story. I want it to be something that I can go, you had to be there. You wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe that, all of these things that we're seeing right now.
Absolutely.
There have to be a footnote. There have to be a story. There has to be a different world on the other side of it, because we didn't come here just to go out like this. I didn't come here for this, and I didn't come in eyes open to not facilitate it somehow either.
Right. Right.
You know, it feels like a mantle has been handed, and then somehow over the technology, which is, as much as they're weaponizing it, we're also kind of using it to our ends and kind of having to duck and dive around it. But creating connections and hearing other people's story and using, and you know, they're showing you ways and bits of knowledge, and you learn from everyone. Because like I said, I've learned so much from your broadcasts as well, that has made me just think, okay, let me go and look a little bit deeper on these things, and also know that it's not just you who's out there seeing a different way. Because sometimes you're like, surely,
Yeah.
is it just, it feels so insular, it feels so isolating.
Yes, it
But there
does.
are so many people out there, and more waking up by the day. So we're going to a good place. We've just got to earn it. I think that's what we've got to say. We've got to earn it. And then, because it will have been so hard earned, we won't let it go. Not in our
Yes.
lifetimes. Not in our lifetimes.
You're right. That's a good point. Yeah.
And we could talk forever more.
I know, it feels like I've no, see, that's the thing about the technology. I don't always like it. And the fact that I like the face-to-face interactions, but you know, we can't have that. I can't just fly over and have tea with you and, you know, scones, right? But that'll come, right? We will definitely meet each other. But until that time, this technology is amazing. You know, it has connected people that would have never met, you know, in distant lands. And that is the power and the beauty of it. So I do appreciate that we did have something during this war, this information war. And even though it's used against us, we are so, I mean, innovative. We find ways around, you know, what they're doing. And it is beautiful. So I don't know what technology will look like on the other side. Will we need it as much? You know, but I'm excited.
Who knows where technology is already? Because if this is the technology that we have in our homes, en masse, then we know we have to assume that technology has superseded far and beyond what we're permitted to have. It's far beyond it. And past that, if we don't have any technology, and I used to say this to a cousin of mine, his passed now as well, but I'd be like, if we lost the phones, then, you know, then our telepathy might switch on.
True.
Who knows what it is? Because whatever goes down, we always work and innovate and grow and make things happen. Because look at what was supposed to happen, and somehow we rose up and we came up out of this. So once we move through the little bump, there'll be a new, we won't let it happen again, because this has been painful for all of us.
Very. And it had to be, you know, that's the thing, like you realize the balance of it all. And it's like, again, you know, the Bible does talk about the birth pangs, and birth is so painful, but yet on the other side of it, there's no memory of the pain, really. It fades because of the gift of that new life. It, you know, it pales in comparison to the pain. So we are going through the birth pangs, and what is being birthed is so beautiful. And we you know, the storytellers have to come forward. Like you said, we need people to document these times and to never lose the oral tradition of telling these stories, of being creative, like the writers and the screen, you know, the dramatists and all kinds. We need every art form to document these times so that we never forget. And like you said, we will never let this happen on our watch.
Before you go, Jennifer, can you just tell everyone where to connect with you and when you're doing your next sharing and research? And I encourage anybody to, like, if you want to learn something and if you want to be part of a community of people who are just adding to what you find as well. Like even when I watch the playbacks, it's like, oh, I know, you know, like, you know, and I forget I can't tap in or anything like that. But it's just good. It's almost like it's a teaching, and it's a way of awakening people in almost like a gentle way, because sometimes the truth can hit you like a sledgehammer, but you
Mhm.
know, you kind of you connect the dots, you put things together in a way that it's got a very nurturing way of teaching about. So I want to pass that to you as well.
Thank you. Well, I try to keep my platforms standard. So if you search Jennifer Eason on YouTube,
Hmm.
I have a few channels because of the censorship. I've had to create like backup channels because my main channel was taken down. But I have one. If you type into YouTube, Jennifer Eason, the Patriot, it will take you to the channel that I'm working with right now actively. I've tried to pare it down and drop the Patriot, but I think you can still search for that main channel. On Instagram, I go by Jenny the John, which is Jenny and then John, JAWN. It's a Philadelphia term, but in the description, it has a link to that YouTube page as well. And I have Telegram, same thing, Jennifer Eason, and I'm on Rumble and BitChute under Jennifer Eason. So I have taken down a few of my videos. So you'll only see 2 videos on the channel that I'm working with, because I'm going to be building up more content. But I have all the old content on the alt platforms, BitChute, Rumble. So if anybody wants to look back on some of those older videos, they can find some of them there. So that's how you can find me for now. I'll have a website. I'm working on that. But in the meantime, I'll keep people posted, when that is developed.
Thank you, Jennifer, for being a guest on this week's Her Conversations. And again, thank you for listening. You can find out more about me on my website, which is carolmaywhittick.com, CarolMaewhittick.com. On Facebook under Carol May Whittick, and on Twitter and on Instagram under Casmic, CAZMICK. So until the next episode, see you then. Take care.